misunderstood movement, and a lot of people shy away from it simply because they either don't know how to do the movement or because they've been taught improperly and then have hurt themselves as they go. A lot of times, trainers that don't know how to deadlift properly or know other movements and then see the deadlift, think they can accomplish it, but don't always they have good intentions but don't understand the technique behind it. Lifting is highly, highly technical, especially when you start adding lots of weight. And with deadlift, squat, and bench, you can pull a lot of weight. There's people that lift incredible amounts of weight. But what we're looking for is to be able to do that safely and with the correct technique. So one of the reasons I wanted to create this tutorial setup slash teaching is because I had really great coaches, and I was very, very blessed in that I had good technical coaches and I had great powerlifting coaches, great bodybuilding coaches. So when I wanted to teach deadlift, squat, and bench, I understood it really well. I can perform them proficiently and I can teach it very technically well. I'll post a video of some of my maxes or something like that to kind of give you an idea. A lot of trainers shy away because they don't have that technical training, and I want to be able to take what you know and add on top of it and hopefully give you a really great combination in order to best work with your clients and yourself for the best results. A couple of common mistakes that you'll see with deadlifting. People say, oh, I hurt my back, that's why I don't deadlift. It's a silly movement. Well, that's because one of the most common things you'll see is someone's back rounding, simply because they try to go too heavy too soon or have improper form causing that back rounding. And we don't want that. So there's some very specific things we'll do in order to break down how to avoid doing that. One of the biggest things we're going to address in stage 2 is your position. Position is everything with technical lifting. If you don't have your position right, it doesn't matter how strong you are, you'll reach a point where you just can't lift the weight and your form will fall apart. We don't want that. So position is huge. Second is not trying to go too heavy too soon. Always start out lighter and then move from there. One of the biggest things that I do that's been very successful is I start everyone on a hex bar deadlift. So this is assuming that someone is ready to do that. We've already addressed any mobility issues or any lower back issues, things like that. This is someone that's healthy, that has the mobility and the base strength to start by pulling 65 pounds. So we start with that. The hex bar is going to be heavier than a regular bar. Just to clarify, you can use a standard Olympic bar. I prefer deadlift bar, and then you put bumper plates on the outside. It gets you set up to go because not everyone can pull 135 off the ground, which is what the regular bar plus plates will be, and it'll be slightly more of the hex bar because it weighs more than a regular Olympic bar. So back to where we were. When you go to pull, position is everything, and I start with the hex bar because it helps teach position when you're starting. So because of the hex bar design in an octagon, knee position and foot position can be wrong, and you can still practice lifting the weight as you correct your form. Whereas with the standard bar, it's much harder and there's things that you already have to have down. So I prefer the hex bar to start with, and I'll usually go 4 to 5 weeks on form and capacity work using 5x5s. So we'll work up to where someone hits 5 repetitions of what they're doing, 5 up and downs, 4 or 5 sets with rests in between. Once they can proficiently do that, then we'll move on to an Olympic bar. So let's talk about equipment. When you're deadlifting, you want to make sure you don't use a running shoe. The reason being is, and the same thing for squat, the reason being is the heel is usually elevated and then the toe is down. So you sit in this position and the heel isn't cupped very well. Or if it is, it's slightly imbalanced or meant to roll to one side or the other for when your foot strikes. What you want to do is either have a squat shoe, which you could do, which really secures your heel, or what I prefer is like a Levi or a Converse or just barefoot. I prefer to deadlift barefoot. You get a flat position, and first off, you'll wreck your shoes, by the way. I've had really nice running shoes and deadlifted and squatted in them when I first started, not known, and I completely blew out $125 pair of Pumas in like 3 months. Sucked. You don't want to do that. So either get rid of the shoes, or if you're in a gym that requires shoes, plus just for safety is kind of good anyway, have the person wear a Levi, a Converse, you can wear a Supra, any kind of skate shoe really will work, or any kind of flat bottom like that. That'll add support as well as flatten out the foot to pull correctly. Second piece of lifting equipment that a lot of people use is a lifting belt. A lot of times I believe this is used incorrectly. What you want to use your lifting belt for is when you're pushing to 80% plus of your 1 repetition max. When your client's first starting, really the first 2 months they shouldn't need a weight belt because their technical ability to perform correct movements under weight usually isn't there yet. I don't really lift with one at all. Your belt provides a couple of things: stability to your core and your lower back. Those are technically the same thing, but most people don't know that. So when you start talking about core strength, that's anything that supports your thoracic cavity, so anything from the rib cage up. So it's very important we start talking about increasing your deadlift numbers, because a lot of people ignore parts of their core simply because they don't understand what that means. That means everything supporting ribs up from the hips. So from the hips down to the ribs up, this section right here, which includes your obliques, includes your lower back. Those are very, very important. So a weight belt helps, or a lifting belt. There's a couple different kinds. I really wouldn't worry about it when you're starting off with clients until they're getting ready to push, let's say 225 or 315 plus. And even then, I lift 405 plus all the time, and I don't use a lifting belt because I have a strong enough core. If you're willing to work towards that with your client, that works great too. Now, let's talk about bars. This is very, very important. There are different kinds of powerlifting bars. There's a standard Olympic bar, and there's also a deadlifting bar. And in amongst that, Rogue and Westside, there's a bunch of different kinds of bars. You have bars specifically for Olympic movements, bars specifically for, if you have a shoulder injury, you have a horseshoe style bar for squat. The biggest difference is the whip in the bar. So your bar itself, how much it will bend, which is very important, because when you go to deadlift, a lot of people will deadlift heavier, and I would argue safer with a bar that has more whip, which means as you go to pull it off the ground, before the weight ever leaves the floor, or even if it slightly comes off the floor, you'll get that bar to go from straight to slightly bent faster, which means it's easier to pull because you're up higher and already cleared a certain amount of vertical. With a stiffer bar, you have to carry that weight, that extra little bit of whip that the bar has, which makes it harder. Realistically, for all clients, if you have a deadlift bar, I recommend using it. You're probably not going to feel the difference until you hit 315 to 405 plus, and then after that, there becomes a significant difference as you're lifting with that bar. So if you can, I definitely recommend using a deadlift bar when you go to deadlift, specific to that movement. The bar itself is going to be longer, and you're going to usually have a more aggressive knurling on the bar itself, which allows for a wider sumo stance if you're a sumo puller like myself, and need that wider stance.